p.m.
Welcome to the coverage of the last day of the qualifiers of this fascinating and really strong event, the Meltwater Champions Tour Goldmoney Asian Rapid. And today is the most important day. It's not how you start, it's how you finish in a chess tournament. And half the field goes through to the knockout stage and half the field gets knocked out already. So it was a very key starting point, and the field was very evenly matched with maybe only a couple down the bottom, Ho Yifang, maybe one other who couldn't qualify. So everything to play for, and we'll have a look of course at the scores at the end of this video, which I'll make sure is about 20 minutes long. Keep it nice and sweet. So the pairings for round 11, just to show you who was paired up against who, and just to remind you who is actually playing, was Alireza, who still had a lot of work to do to qualify. Aronian playing extremely well. Ho Yifang didn't have the best first 2 days, a bit rusty. Vidit in a good position, but needed to prove something today. Wesley probably qualified. And the young Erigaisi, and this guy from India, incredibly strong, only 15 or 16 years old, playing Wesley So. Peter Svidler was struggling somewhat against another young Indian player, Gukesh, one of the youngest grandmasters ever, and Gukesh in a decent position. We had the very exciting Salem, and the list goes on. But let's dive into the first game that we're going to look at, and this was a fascinating encounter from round 11. And one of the reasons this was just so interesting was that after the opening moves, we had Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces playing against Adhiban, and Adhiban didn't have the best starts to the tournament, but he's always a very exciting player, someone who always plays for the win. And they now go into a King's Indian defence, and this is something I love to see more at top level. This setup that Black plays is very exciting, played by Bobby Fischer, Garry Kasparov, Rajbov's played this. It's a great way to play for a win. Black gives up the centre, which White takes over, and Black aims to attack this from the side, but Black often relies in this opening on the break of playing f5 later on. So normally d6, e5 and f5, starting a kingside attack. Different people have thought different things about this opening. Korchnoi thought it was just very good for White, being a classical player because of the centre, but then more attacking players like this as Black. Now they go into the main line. Magnus simply develops, Black castles, bishop e2, and now e5. This is the first key move. Black gets some space in the centre of the board. Black can also try c5 in some cases, but e5 is the more traditional approach to the position. And after castles, Black now tries to force the centre with knight c6, the main line, and now d5. The knight comes back, and this is a very traditional pawn formation. If you're going to learn this opening from either sides, or any opening, you've got to learn about the pawn formation and what both sides' breaks are going to be. Generally, White is going to try to play c5. White has more space on the queen side, and Black is going to try to go f5. I very much love playing these positions as Black, because if the Black attack works, it may be checkmate because the king is over here. If the White attack works, he's going to demolish the queen side, but it might not be mate. And now Magnus plays one of the critical lines, which is b4, the bayonet attack, supporting c5. This is theoretically critical at the moment. Now the old main line used to be something like knight e1, and after now Black gets ready to push the f-pawns, this knight has to move, f3, and then something like f5, and at some point Black will play f4, and then charge down the board. Really interesting positions these. Look at Kasparov's games. He demolished White in these structures. Now, a really amazing thing happened here. After the move b4, Adhiban played one of the main lines, a5, just trying to hold up things on the queen side before he gets ready to play f5. And now Magnus played a move which is just seemingly rubbish. Seemingly no strong player has ever played this move. Seemingly it's the wrong idea. You're closing down the area of the board you want to attack on, and I just don't understand it. I don't understand it at all. I mean, I was speaking to another grandmaster friend, an expert in this, and he will say, if you can play this move, then the King's Indian is just bad. And the move was b5. And I'm still in shock by this move. I think Magnus wanted to try something new. Now, there was also the programmer, one of the programmers, I think it was the latest Stockfish, who said that Stockfish kept wanting to play this move in some of the computer battles, and the programmer had to always reprogram Stockfish, explaining that this move was a mistake because it closed down the position. And that was a very funny comment. Why is this move such a weird move? Because after b6, white can no longer play on the queen side, break on the queen side. And you always assume in the King's Indian that black has the play on the king side with this pawn here and the break here. So it is a mind-blowing idea. Now, I think white is okay in these positions because what Magnus is figuring is he's going to actually try to meet this move by always capturing and getting counterplay himself, as he does perfectly in the game. But it's really a very bizarre choice. I'd love to know what Magnus is thinking here. It's way... I can understand most positions. This is beyond my comprehension of being a classical player, knowing the games of the top world champions in the King's Indian. This is just amazing. If an 1800 played this or below, I mean 1800 is still very strong, let's say 1200, you'd be like classical mistake, bad move, dubious mark. And it really is that strong because the main lines here are for white to play something like a bishop a3, and if the knight moves you play c5, right, and you get this counterplay because of this break. But in the game it's phenomenal. Okay, black, let's see how it goes. Cuts down this one, now a4, and I think here black should have just played the most traditional idea. You've always got to think where to move this knight, but the idea is move that knight, go f5, and now the c5 square is open. I don't see anything wrong with knight d7 and c5, and I think this would equalize at least. For example, if Magnus continues in the game with rook e1, maybe first we play h6, there's no rush because f5, we might allow this knight in here, which seems a bit slack. So let's just play h6, that helps us play g5 later. And the only thing I can think that Magnus was trying to play here is an idea that Boris Gelfand occasionally played as white. It's a very high level, deep idea. And that is knight h4. I can't see any other move. Let's just say you play anything else like knight d2, f5, I'm having all the fun as black. I can steamroll, I can play against the e4 pawn. There's so many ideas. The only thing I can think of is that this idea knight h4, and Gelfand used to play like this. He played very expertly in against some King's Indians, and the point is if black now plays f5, I think white always has to take this because this pawn could just march on otherwise. And after taking it, something like g3, stabilizing the knight and trying to claim that these two pawns are more of a target and can be blocked down at a certain stage. I mean, even here though, I think black is equal. Black certainly can't be worse with this lovely square for the knight. So it really is beyond my comprehension. The first time I've ever said that in commentary, I'm just amazed by this idea. So let's go back. So king h8 was played, and this is quite refined. One of the main problems that black has in this variation is the knight on e7. The knight on e7 is a very bad piece. It's very hard to get in the game. The other knight, surprisingly enough, has a lot of ways to get in the game, but the knight on d7, on e7 can't play a part. And again, a very strong friend of mine, Grandmaster Mark Hedman, always used to play king h8 and put that knight back on this square where it could potentially come out in the game later on. So not a bad idea. Rook a3, and the rook is aiming to come over. Deep level stuff. And now the right move, knight d7, of course. Rook e1, and here knight g8. Now I would have just not been able to resist playing f5 here. And after knight g5 here, trying to come into this square, just knight c5, and again this covers that square very well. And again, this knight is a problem, but we can always go knight g8 at a right stage and then bring it back in like this, pressurizing e4, but this must be equal. Now let's move on. Knight g8 played, bishop d3. Magnus very carefully trying to control this break. And again, f5, just play this blooming move, man. Your opponent's playing weird moves. Come at him. Bishop h6 is a reasonably clever idea because in the Kingsian defense, this bishop can often become quite bad. It's a really double-edged sword. It can be very strong or very bad. And by putting the bishop here, black at least swaps it off. But after some moves like bishop b2, the bishop comes back and bishop c2, opening up the rook. Now white is very well positioned to meet f5, and this is probably Magnus's idea all along. Total prophylactic play, closing the queen side and waiting for this break to try and punish it. But he's certainly in a better position here than he would have been had black played f5 and a lot of other positions. He takes this one off, and now a very clever move, knight e2. If the e pawn moves, we get rid of the bishop. White's bishop are nicely placed, the rook comes over, and it has to be said, I like Magnus's position here. So it's worked somehow. Now f4, g3, nice move. You can't allow that pawn to stay there. Pawn takes, and now even knight takes would have been a good option. Immediately trying to control this, and also using the g file, king h1, rook g1, getting on that file, turning the attack around. The bishop on c2, great attacking piece here. H takes g3 was played. The knight comes to c5, and now they play a little bit of manoeuvring battle. Magnus trying to prove that he has the attack. Magnus well in charge here. Has to be blocked that bishop. And now knight to h4, getting rid of that bishop, a bit like the Gelfand plan. And this is a clever check because it does force f3. Why is this good? Because now after some exchanges which had to be played anyway, we can see that these pawns are a little bit weaker than they would be. So you're trying to make your opponent play a pawn move to come in on them. King g8. Bishop c1, nice move, the knight is a bad piece. Queen f6, and it's here where Magnus maybe misses his first win. He plays very logically with bishop takes h6. I say logically because that knight was actually, it's found its way to this strong square, like we said before, this maneuver. But he could have played g4. I totally understand why he didn't play this move, but he could have done this move. When black is pretty much forced to sack the knight. It's so easy for me to say this with computer analysis. I wouldn't have played this. I would have just seen the black queen coming in here and being like, no, I'm not doing this. But you can now play king h3, and with the knight being able to cover the king on g3, and also another knight coming to f5, blocking black's pieces, there's nothing at all here for black. Look how well this rook plays, this very clever maneuver. And after something like e4 trying to generate play, just bishop e3. We can even force the pieces back. If black tries sacrificing more pieces, we have enough to block up the position, and the queen can come over and it's easily defending. So bishop h6 was played, and now Magnus plays g4, but all of a sudden after e4, this is a typical break in the Kingsian defense. Black's pieces come to life, and this is why Adhiban's bishop e4 check was very clever. You're tempting that pawn forwards, so we have a target. Forcing your opponent to play pawn moves around his king can often give you entrance into the position. Knight f5, and let's now go onwards. The position clarifies a bit now with some exchanges in the middle of the board, and a very clever move now that Magnus might have missed. Rook takes e4. And all of a sudden, after queen b2 check and queen a3 check, Magnus is very weak along the back here. And after queen e3, queen takes a4, well, this is a very useful pawn to capture. That pawn, combined with a bishop, could be a winner. Now king g3, just getting the king around to potentially a nice safe light square or somewhere out of the way, allowing the knight to be movable because breaking the pin would have kept the balance. But Magnus dived in for a check. And after queen e7, threatening mate, Adhiban really took the draw here by keep checking the king, and we can see that after a number of checks here, well, not really much progress was made. But he could have played in this position immediately queen b2 check, and this is the move he missed. And after something like king f3, just a4. And in actual fact, black has a very solid defense here. The queen guards the bishop, and it's a very easy plan of pushing that pawn. And I think this is one idea which would have really shocked Magnus and maybe even beaten Magnus. Madness or Magnus? I think he's He's not that mad. He's probably one of the most sane grandmasters I know. But that would have been a chance. But anyway, very interesting play. Now let's have a look at another game. Had to spend more time on that because it's such a mind blower for me. Just going against all classical chess, and when that happens, you're like, this is totally unique. Now, probably one of the stories of the day was Adhiban's win against Anish Giri. And Adhiban, it was Anish's birthday. Adhiban played 1b3, and there was a lot of jokes about this. If Adhiban could beat Anish with 1b3, what a funny story it would be. And I'm going to now just show snippets from the other game. Adhiban's just brought out, of course, a chessable on this 1b3 move, which you can buy. They call it the B3 Cowboys. It's a really fun way to start the game, and I think if you're sick of learning lots of theory, which a lot of us are, even though this course probably has a lot of theory in it, that's the paradox. You want to learn an opening that has no theory, so you have to actually learn loads of theory on that opening anyway. But this is a really fun way to play. If you're sick of learning theory, if you just want to play some chess, B3, Adhiban's course, is certainly worth investigating. We can tell that Adhiban's loved by his peers because even Anish was saying nice things after his loss against him. And we're just going to go to a critical point in the game. The opening, well, we can go through the opening moves. It kind of transposed more into this move. I wouldn't say it's a pure Larsen's opening, but it's kind of like a reversed Nimzo Indian or Queen's Indian. D3 makes it a little bit unique because now White wants to go for this, and I actually had this position once as White against Grandmaster Hamadici and managed to win. And now with E4, it goes to a more traditional King's Indian attack. In actual fact, if you're very clever about your patterns and you pictured the way Adhiban set his pieces up in the last game, White's done that here, but the other way around. He's fianchettoed like in the King's Indian. He's got his knight here instead of this square, but he has got his E4 break in, hence why it's not the King's Indian defense, King's Indian attack. Another opening which Bobby Fischer made incredibly popular. So they went through a standard maneuvering stage here, and again I only want to look at the highlights of the show really. And now Anish's position was absolutely fine around here, gaining the two bishops, but Adhiban had this nice central control, but open lines. I think Anish's position is still to be favoured. But here Adhiban gets a little bit active, and after this clever move b6, he's tied this bishop down. And now Anish does a move which is pretty shocking in actual fact. It should be seen that these two knights are very strong. And one thing you've got to do in chess, we all learn the rules of chess. We all learn like things like the two bishops are good, space advantage, but you've got to be able to break the rules in order to become a better player. And you've got to really understand the position and understand, like, not think, oh, I'm never giving up those two bishops. You've got to think, well, hang on a minute, there's a time and place for everything. Don't really, the rules are very general things, and you've got to be willing to break them. And I think it's clear here that White's knights are incredibly strong here, having threats are coming into position, and it was certainly time to give up the bishop pair to get rid of one of those knights. And with rook e8 next, I think Anish is doing very well here. Yes, you don't have the bishop pair advantage, but these knights are just too good. And this move f5 is so loosening. The bishop is now blocked in, and here, well, even rook takes d7 followed by knight c5 would have been really just winning for White. Knight f6 check was another clever idea, and the point being, well, the queen is on pre, the queen has to take, and after this one, if the b pawn drops, that queen will pawn, the pawn will queen. I've never seen a queen pawning. I like to see that. That sounds like some dodgy film, doesn't it? The queen will pawn. No, let's not go there. Let's not go there. And after something like queen takes f3 here, well, Adhiban just took on b7, and here knight takes a5, and after this check, well, queen e5, combining the strength of this pawn with an attack. This is the kind of position where the best move would be f5, f6, just showing how weakening this lunge was, this f5 move. And after rook g8, the last piece comes into the game, And, well, we can win that rook at any moment, and Adhiban went on to win. Nice game from Adhiban. Okay, the third game we're going to look at, and we'll talk about the players and who's gone through at the end of this. We're only doing 4 games today. Was Gukesh versus Salem for UAE. Now, Gukesh, like I said, one of the youngest grandmasters in the world from India, a real talent. He's going to do fantastically well in his career, as so many of the Indian players are. They're really well trained, they're very disciplined, they have a very good classical chess education. And this was a little bit sad, and one of the things, again, we get a king's in defense. You can see aggressive players like Salem. This is just his kind of opening, and they go into that main line. So I thought I'd pick this out again. Bishop e2, e5, castles, and now we saw knight to c6 being played by Adhiban. Knight to a6 was an idea of Grandmaster John Nunn, who was waiting for c5 to be played so this knight could come here. And if you ever get this structure, well, look how well placed that knight is. You go a5, you stabilize the knight there, pressure against this pawn. And if you compare it to the main line, remember what one of Black's major problems was in this position? It was this knight. You often have to go king h8 and bring that knight around the long way. So this knight a6 is a very clever positional move, but not quite as forcing. Now, of course, White doesn't want to oblige by playing that pawn forwards, weakening that square. Instead, he keeps the tension. Rook e1, and now Black has to wait as such. And here, Salem takes the opportunity to take on d4 and go knight g4. This is typical aggressive play, going for the win. Black wants to bring his queen out, which would win the game if you can play this in one move. The bishop is released. h3, one of the only moves, and there's no going backwards for this chap. Knight takes f2. And this is trying to use the dark squares and get some counterplay, and we get quite an interesting position after queen b2, knight ce2, knight c5. The king runs back, rook e8, so Black's going to get a number of pawns to this, knight c2, and just as things get interesting here, a tragedy happens. And this is one of the things that pisses me off about online chess. Queen b3, a tragic mouse slip in such a fascinating position. And of course, there's no reason why you shouldn't take the queen, try to qualify here, and he does. I have to be honest, I do prefer White here. It seems like the White king has found safety here, but I wouldn't rule Black out here. Black is going to win another pawn at his leisure, having 3 pawns. So a little bit of a sad end there. And the final game we are going to look at here, let me just get that one, is Peter Svidler versus Ho Yifang. 2 players we haven't really talked about. Now, Ho Yifang came last. Peter Svidler had some chances to qualify, didn't quite get there. But I want to show you this because, again, I'm trying to pick openings which are unique, things that happen in this tournament that haven't happened in chess history, and maybe new trends and exciting tactics. Now, they start with the Najdorf Sicilian with a6, one of the main lines, and now this is a move that Magnus played against Peter Svidler early on in the tournament, b3. Now, this move, it's not so stupid as we're going to see in the game, but, you know, let's just give you, the viewer, a question. You may or may not know the Najdorf. If you know the Najdorf, your answer will probably be a lot easier to find here. But what would be the most logical move here? And I don't understand why no one's played this yet. What is the most logical move in this position? What is White trying to do? White's trying to get the bishop here, the bishop on this diagonal, right? What is one of the main ideas Black goes for on the Najdorf? The move that Bobby Fischer nearly always played, that Gary Kasparov played, that Jan plays, Jan Nepomucci. e5. Just put the pawn on e5, man. Attack the knight, force the knight away, and ask that bishop what on earth it's doing on b2, looking at the pawn on e5. The only thing I can think that White's going to try is something like knight e2, and maybe at some point, let's say after these very logical moves, some f4 move. But this must still be the way to play this position. e3 was played by Ho Yifang, and after bishop b2, it just seems like you're not cutting that bishop out. Bishop e7, queen d2. This is a logical development strategy for White, and I've seen this happen before. And after b5, you can now go for the typical pawn storm over here. The bishop is very nice. White has better development. But there's another opportunity here. And generally, the move that happens now is a very good morphing of the position that favours white. White gains 3 pawns, 3 passed pawns, and keeps the pressure. Bishop takes b5. This is well worth remembering when you can follow it up with a knight coming here. The queen has to move. This often happens in the Najdorf. You get the 3rd pawn. This knight is too strong. And here, well, black should probably take that queen off when you get this kind of ending where white is normally always to be preferred here. White's pieces are better. You can control things and you can slowly push these guys up the board, pushing black backwards. These 3 pawns are going to be very dangerous. Now, Ho Yifang decided to keep the queens on the board, but after knight c6, Svidler played a brilliant, typical move in the Sicilian. This next move, if you play the open Sicilian and you can't guess it, you're doing something wrong. You must know your middle game plans in the open Sicilian. And knight d5 is one of the main ideas that white wants to play. And if you watched my video yesterday, you will know this move because Anish Giri smashed up the Alireza Firouzja with this same idea. And this is really just crushing. The knight is too strong. It has to be taken. But after this one, black's king is trapped. Black has to try giving back material to get the bishop here. But even though this is done, white's attack remains. Queen b7. It's not easy to defend. And now rook c5. In actual fact, bishop takes g7 would have been better, and then bishop f6 with undeniably too many strong threats on the dark squares. And if rook takes a2, what could be the finish here? I'm sure you all get this. Queen d8 check and rook d8 checkmate. But even though that may have been a stronger move, the way the game went was also very good with this equal material advantage. Equal material advantage doesn't really make much sense, but you know what I mean. It feels like white's got a material advantage. And after a number of moves, well, now white does have the material advantage, all the pressure, all the threats, and Svidler went on to safely win. So who blooming well qualified? Well, the standings at the end of that, Aronian, a real force to be reckoned with, playing brilliant chess. Artemiev, maybe a breakthrough tournament possibly for him. Good to see Liren back, and it's the top 8 players who went through, so only one Indian player in that mix. That was Arjun Erigaisi, the young Indian tactician and the lowest rated player in the field. Congratulations to Arjun for getting through. A brilliant result. You've got to feel for Alireza Firouzja. This is not the first time he's got on that qualification score. Everyone else on that score qualified except for him. Poor guy. Very unlucky. It's due to his head-to-head results, and other players who are going to be annoyed. Vidit threw it away at various moments. Really should have qualified. Gukesh had a good tournament, but all in all, some really exciting chess. And we're into the knockout stages tomorrow. It's going to be fascinating, and one of the big games to watch out for there is Magnus Carlsen versus Wesley. So, oh yeah, going to be great. Okay, that's my roundup. Please remember to like and subscribe to the video and the channel and all that kind of stuff. It does help. I'll try to keep this up every day. We're going to be more persistent on YouTube going forwards with various different things. Bye for now.